सर्ववेदिक सत्फल सर्वसिद्धांत रत्नाढ्य सर्वलोकैक त्रिप्रद सर्वभागवत प्राण श्रीमद्भागवत प्रभो कलिध्वांतोदितादित्य श्रीकृष्ण परिवर्तित परमानंद पाठाय प्रेमवर्षक्षरायते सर्वदा सर्वसेव्याय श्रीकृष्णाय नमस्तुमे मदेक बंधो मत्संगी मद्गुरो मन्महाधन मन्निस्तारक मद्भाग्य मदानंद नमस्तुते असाधु साधुतादायिन् अतिनीचोच्चताकर हानवंशकदाचिन् मां प्रेम्णा हृत्कण्ठयोस्फुरा। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओके, 2.10.9 to 2.10.25. Text 9. एकमेकतराभावे यदा नोपलभामहे त्रितयं तत्रयो वेद स आत्मा स्वाश्रयाश्रयः. All three of the above mentioned stages of different living entities are interdependent. In the absence of one, another is not understood. But the Supreme Being, as a shelter of the shelter, sees every one of them and is independent of all. Therefore, he is the supreme shelter. They are interdependent. Without one cannot see the other. Without the sun, we cannot, the eyesight cannot function. So like that, if you carefully examine, each of them depends on another. तत्र तदाय तत् त्रितयम् आलोचन आत्मकेन प्रत्ययेन यो वेद साक्षितया पश्यति स परमात्मा आश्रय. And then there is someone else who's witnessing all three: the Adhyatma Purusha, the Adhidaiva Purusha, and the Adhibhautika Purusha. That is the Paramatma, and he is the shelter. तेषामपि परस्परम् आश्रयत्वम् अस्त्येवेति तत् व्यवच्छेदार्थं विशेषम्. Now one might say that between these three Purushas, each of them is the shelter for the other two. And therefore, it clearly says, Swashraya Ashraya. He is the shelter for himself, which means that he has no other shelter. Swashrayaha Ananyashraya. He is a shelter for himself means he has no other shelter. Such a Asau Anyesham Ashrayaha. And he is a shelter for everyone else other than him.
Admit it, please.
Tathacha Bhagavan Vakshiyati. And this will be stated by Bhagavan in 11.22.31. Let's have a look at that. 11.22.31. दृग् रूपमार्गम वपुरत्र रंध्रे परस्परम सिद्ध्यति यस्वतः खे आत्मा यदेशाम अपरो य आद्य स्वयानुभूत्या अखिल सिद्ध सिद्धिः. Sight, visible form, and the reflected image of the sun within the aperture of the eye all work together to reveal one another. But the original sun, standing in the sky, is self-manifested. Similarly, the Supreme Soul, the original cause of all entities, who is thus separate from all of them, acts by the illumination of his own transcendental experience as the ultimate source of manifestation of all mutually manifesting objects. Form is recognized by the function of the eye, and the eye's function is understood by the presence of perceivable form. This interaction of sight and form further depends on the presence of light provided by the demigods, whose service of universal management depends on the presence of those who are to be managed, namely the living entities experiencing form with their eyes. You cannot have a government without the governed. Thus, the three factors, adhyatma, represented by the senses such as the eye, adhyuta, sense objects such as form, and adhidaiva, the influence of the controlling deities, exist in an interdependent relationship. The sun globe itself is said to be self manifested, self luminous, and self experiencing. It does not share the interdependence of the senses and sense objects, although facilitating their function. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead facilitates the interdependent experiences of all living entities. For example, newspapers, radio, and television reveal world events to the mass of people. Parents reveal facts about life to their children, teachers to their students, friends to friends, and so on. The government manifests its will to the people and the people to their government. The sun and moon reveal the visual forms of all objects, and the perception of sound reveals audible form. The vibrations of particular types of music or rhetoric reveal the inner feelings of other living beings, and other types of knowledge are revealed by aroma, touch, and taste. In this way, through the interaction of the senses and mind with innumerable sense objects, different types of knowledge are acquired. All such informative interactions, however, depend upon the supreme illuminating power of the personality of Godhead. As stated in Brahma Samhita 5.52, Yat Chakshuresha Savita Sakalagrahana. Among all the planets, the sun is considered the eye of the Supreme Lord. The personality of Godhead is eternally omniscient by his own transcendental potency. And thus, no one can reveal anything to the Lord about anything. Still, Lord Krishna humbly accepts our prayers offered in Krishna consciousness. In conclusion, Lord Krishna clearly explains here that his sublime characteristics are completely different from those of the manifest universe. The Lord is therefore the supreme transcendental entity, free from all material influence. एतेनैव व्यभिचारित्वात् तेषां मायामयत्वम् अपि उक्तम्. So from this we understand that these three personalities are within Maya. This does not contradict what was taught in 2.1.10. Jiva Goswami Prabhu. Ekam Ekatara. This is Tattva Sandarbha. Wait, let me open up Tattva Sandarbha directly. This is that. The words, in the absence of any one of these, indicate that none of these Purushas, Adhyatmika, Adhibhautika, and Adhidaivika, is an ashraya because they are each dependent on one another. Thus, for example, without a visible object, the sense whose existence is inferred by its perception of that object is not manifested, nor is the seer. And without the sense and the seer, there is no presiding deity such as the sun god to be known by inference from the activity of the sense. Moreover, without the presiding deity, the sense does not function. And without the functioning of that sense, nothing becomes an object of sight. In this way, in the absence of any one of these, we do not perceive the others. But in that situation of mutual dependence, he who sees all three by direct visual perception, who knows them as a constant witness, is the super soul, their ashraya. It is understood that each of the three is the ashraya of the others, and so to distinguish the super soul, he is qualified as ashraya who is his own ashraya, who has no other ashraya. He is also the ashraya of all the others. The Ashraya is called Atma to acknowledge the partial non-difference of the pure Jiva and super soul as part and whole. Undoubtedly, the pure Jiva, who is called the witness, is an Ashraya. This we know from statements such as these. Although transcendentally considers himself a material product. This is first canto, 7th chapter. Wakeful awareness, dreaming, and deep sleep, all caused by the modes of material nature, are functions of the mind. The individual soul has been ascertained to be distinct from these functions, for he is their witness. This is 11th canto verse. And the pure one witnesses the actions of the impure agent, the mind. Where is that from? Shuddho Vijashte Hyash Avishuddha Kartuhu. 5.11.12. An alternative proposal concerning whose ashraya is that the three persons, Adhyatmik and so on, are all ashrayas. Yes, this is true. But because the three are mutual ashrayas of one another, none of them is the exclusive ashraya. These three are not what is denoted by the primary meaning of the word ashraya indicated in the verse beginning, in the absence of any one of these. But then, let the witnessing self be the ashraya. This proposal is responded to in the words, he who knows all three is the Supreme Soul. That Supreme Soul is the witnessing self. The Jiva then is defined as the one who is his own Ashraya, Swashraya, having no other Ashraya, but it is the Super Soul who is the Ashraya of the Jiva. Swashraya, Ashraya. Such is the difference between the Jiva and the Super Soul, as stated in the Hamsaguhya prayer. A person may know everything about the modes of nature, but still not know the all-knowing, unlimited Lord whom I worship. Where is that from? That is from 6.4.25. Therefore, the only true Ashraya is the Super Soul, who is described in the verse beginning, Abhasascha, that from which the visible cosmic manifestation. The verse under discussion, Bhagavatam 2.10.9, was spoken by Sri Shukadev. The problem of correctly identifying the foundation of all existence is not a mere philosophical curiosity. On this question depends the very success or failure of human life. When otherwise intelligent persons fail to recognize their true shelter, they misdirect their lives to pursue imperfect goals. Many persons misidentify the Adhibhautika Purusha, the material body, as the only ashraya and become materialists. Others worship the Adhidaivika in the form of various gods, unaware that these demigods are actually servants of the Supreme God. And others become impersonalists and worship themselves, the Jiva, the Adhyatmika Purusha, as the Supreme. All such persons who make up the vast majority of the human race fail to realize the potential of human life. So the vast majority, they are interested in the gross body, which requires a subtle body and the Jivatma. And of course, the Jivatma requires the Paramatma. The Paramatma is both inside the Jivatma and next to the Jivatma. So, but then a few who accept Vedic authority, they take shelter of these demigods. These demigods do not have these gross bodies which require food and drinks to sustain their uh, bodies. They don't have gross bodies of this type at all. So they are Adhidaivika Purushas. And then, so the gross body is the Adhi Bhautika Purusha. The demigods are Adhidaivika Purushas. And then you have the Jivatma himself, who is the experiencer. Seer means experiencer. He is the Adhyatmika Purusha. And then, of course, you have the Supreme Purusha, Parama Purusha, or Purushottama, Lord Narayana, who is the super soul of the Jivatmas. The vast majority are interested in the gross body. A few are interested in demigods. And then even smaller number are interested in realizing themselves as different from the gross body and subtle body. And then hardly anyone can even detect that there is somebody else who's the shelter of the Jivatma himself. Only a few are interested in discovering the ultimate ashraya. They are the most rare and fortunate souls, and they should be informed that the best source of guidance for their endeavor is Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, we'll go to Krishna Chakravarti Thakur. Let's see. And then he refers to 6.4.25, 11.3.27. And then he says, Ayamartha, this is the point. Adhyatmadinam paraspara ashrayanam jiva ashraya. The jiva is a shelter for these three mutual shelters. Jivasya paramatma ashraya. The paramatma is the shelter of the jiva. Here when we talk of jiva, we are talking of the pure jiva. Paramatmanaha. Paramatma eva ashraya. For the Paramatma himself is the ashraya. There's no other ashraya. Iti ashraya tattvam Paramatma eva. So from that we understand that the shelter of the Paramatma is the Paramatma himself. So he is the ashraya of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the 10th topic. तथा विष्टव्याहमिदं कृत्स्नम् एकांशेन स्थितो जगत् इत्युक्तेः स्वं कृष्ण एव आश्रय यस्य स परमात्मेति व्याख्याने श्रीकृष्णस्य मुख्यमाश्रयत्वं तदंशत्वात् परमात्मनश्च निर्विशेषस्वरूपत्वात् ब्रह्मणश्चेत्येकम् आश्रयतत्वम् उपासकभेदात् त्रिधा भासते. And that shelter is ultimately Lord Sri Krishna, because Bhagavad Gita clearly states that Lord Krishna has entered into this universe in a small portion, as a small portion of himself. So from that understanding, we come to the conclusion that Paramatma is also sheltered by Sri Krishna. So the ultimate shelter is Sri Krishna. And because the Paramatma is his plenary portion, therefore Paramatma is also can be said to be the Ashraya. And the impersonal feature of that Paramatma is the impersonal Brahman, the Brahma Jyoti. So in that way, we have one principle of Ashraya that manifests itself to three different degrees, corresponding to the three different types of worshippers, meditators on him. Okay, let's get back to this. There are innumerable living entities, one dependent on the other in the relationship of the controller and the controlled. But without the medium of perception, no one can know or understand who is the controlled and who is the controller. For example, the sun controls the power of our vision. We can see the sun because the sun has its body, and the sunlight is useful only because we have eyes. Without our having eyes, the sunlight is useless, and without sunlight, the eyes are useless. Thus, they are interdependent. Neither of them is independent. Therefore, a natural question arises, who made them interdependent? The one who has made such a relationship of interdependence must be ultimately completely independent, as stated in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The ultimate source of all interdependent objects is the completely independent subject. This ultimate source of all interdependence is the supreme truth or Paramatma, the super soul, who is not dependent on anything else. He is Swashraya Ashraya, dependent only on himself, and thus he is the supreme shelter of everything. Still, Paramatma and Brahman are subordinate to Bhagavan, because Bhagavan is Purushottama, or the super person, the source of both the super soul and Brahman. In the Bhagavad Gita 15.18, Lord Krishna says that he is the Purushottama, the source of everything. And thus it is concluded that Sri Krishna is the ultimate source and shelter of all entities, including the super soul and the supreme Brahman. In Bhakti Shastri Deluxe, we saw Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's explanation of the last 5 verses of the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And there he explains that Bhagavan, he is superior to Paramatma, who is superior to Brahman, who is superior to the Jivatmas, the living entities. Even accepting that there is no difference between the super soul and the individual soul, The individual soul is dependent on the super soul for being liberated from the illusion of the material energy. The individual is under the clutches of the illusory energy, and therefore, although qualitatively one with the super soul, he is under the illusion of identifying himself with matter. And to get out of this illusory conception of actual life, the individual soul has to depend on the super soul to be recognized as one with him. In that sense, also, the super soul is the supreme shelter, and there's no doubt about it. The individual living entity, the jiva, is always dependent on the super soul, Paramatma, because the individual soul forgets his spiritual identity, whereas the super soul, Paramatma, does not forget his transcendental position. In the Bhagavad Gita, these separate positions of the Jivatma and the Paramatma are specifically mentioned. In the fourth chapter, Arjuna, the Jiva soul, is represented as forgetful of his many, many previous births. But the Lord, the Super Soul, is not forgetful. The Lord even remembers when he taught the Bhagavad Gita to the Sun God some billions of years before. The Lord can remember such millions and billions of years, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 7.26 as follows. Vedaham samatitani vartamanani charjana bhavishyani cha bhutani mamtu vedana kaschana. The Lord in his eternal blissful body of knowledge is fully aware of all that happened in the past, that which is going on at the present, and also what will happen in the future. But in spite of his being the shelter of both the Paramatma and Brahman, persons with the forefront of knowledge are unable to understand him as he is. The propaganda of the identity of cosmic consciousness with the consciousness of the individual living entities is completely misleading, because even such a person or individual soul as Arjuna could not remember his past deeds, although he is always the Lord. And what can the tiny, ordinary man, falsely claiming to be one with the cosmic consciousness, know about his past, present, and future? Text 10. Purushondam vinirvidya yadasau sa vinirgataha atmano yanam anvichan aposrakshi shuchi. After separating the different universes, the gigantic universal form of the Lord, Mahavishnu, which came out of the causal ocean, the place of appearance for the first Purusha avatar, entered into each of the separate universes, desiring to lie on the created transcendental water, Garbhodaka. Uktameva adhyatmadivibhagam prapanchayan yatutaham tvaya prishto vairajat purushaditam yatasi tadupakyasye iti yat pratigyatam tad utpatti prakaramaha purusha ityadina. In 2.9.45, this question was already raised. This point was already raised, that he is going to explain how creation took place from the Vairaja Purusha, from the universal form. So this is an elaboration of what was stated regarding Adhyatma, Adidaiva, Adhibhautika. Purusho Vairajaha Andam Vinirvidya Pritakritya Vinirgataha Pritak Sthita iti arthaha Ayanam Sthanam Avichan Vimvishan. So he uh, separated himself. No, he separated the different universes, and then he searched for a place to stay, because he is personally pure. So then he created the pure ocean named Garbhodaka. अथ स्वयं भगवल्लक्षण परमरूपं तद्देवाश्रयं स्तोतुं तदंशभूतस्य पुरुषस्य वैभवं तादृशत्वेन दर्शयति. In order to glorify the supreme form that characterizes Swayam Bhagavan, who is the Ashraya, he then shows that his plenary portion, the Purusha, is having a similar glory. यदासो विनिर्गतः आद्योऽवतारः परस्य इत्याद्युक्तरीत्या श्रीभागवत आविर्भूतः श्रीभगवत आविर्भूतः He then quotes 2.6.42, which talks about the first incarnation, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. तदा तो अंडम आत्मनिलीनं तत्वसमूहं विनिर्विद्य आत्मनः पृथक् कर्तुम् आरभ्य. So all these, the Brahmanda was merged in him, and then he divided the various elements which had also merged into him. So he's separated them. Now this is a description of the beginning of that. अथवा अंडम निज आविर्भाव स्थानम श्री भगवंतम विनिर्विद्य ततः पृथक् भूत्वा विनिर्गतः सन् अपस्तत् पर्यन्तानि तत्त्वानि. And then when it says that he created water, these are interlie on the created transcendental water. He created water. It refers to his manifestation of all the elements up to water. Prithvi api tad antarbhutattvena gaya. Earth, water, fire, air, ether. Earth is also included in this. एवं दशभिर् महापुराणस्य लक्षणैः जीवेश्वर विभागं निरूप्य जीवानाम् ईश्वर भक्त्येव निस्तारम् अभिव्यज्य इति यत् प्रतिज्ञातम् अर्थं वक्तुं कथां प्रस्तौति पुरुषोत्तममित्यादि. So in that way, through 10 identifying characteristics of the Mahapurana, Shukadev Goswami has described the distinction between the Jiva and the Ishvara. And then he has revealed that the Jivas can be delivered only by bhakti to that Ishvara. Then he moves on to a description of, to a clarification of something that he had mentioned in 2.9.45. This is an introduction to that. Katham mukurapi vairajasya adhyatmadi kathaiva prapanchate bhagavato ati madhura leelavatara rupa gunadi katha kim अस्वीयस्यः दृष्टाः सत्यं ताः कथा आस्वादनीयत्वेन तेषु खलु उपदेष्टव्या ये तद् भक्तिसिद्धा नित्यसिद्धा वा महानुभावाः ते तत् सौन्दर्यामृत लीलामृत सिन्धौ स्वत एव अविरामं खेलन्ति एव ये पुनरन्ये विषयानन्द तल्पे निद्रन्ति ये च कर्मफल दुःख तरंगे मूर्छन्ति ते ततः प्रबोधयितुम् एव अशक्या कथं भगवल्लीला उपदेश्यन्ताम् यदुपदेशादेव ते साधकभक्ता भवेयुरिति महाकारुणिक पुराण चूडामणिर् अयम् तां ततः प्रबोधयितुं भङ्ग्या किमपि मुहुरपि यतते स्म. An objection is raised here. Again, the topic of adhyatma, adhibhuta, adhideva in relationship to the Vairaja Purusha, the universal form, is being elaborated. So then what about the very sweet Leelavataras, their forms, their qualities? What about them? There's a typing error here. Wait, let me just trace out something. अल्पीयस्य दृष्टाः अल्पीयस्य अल्पीयस्य So why are the topics of the very sweet Leela avatars, their forms, their qualities, and so on of Bhagavan, why are they considered to be insignificant? The answer is given. True. Those topics are meant to be relished. So, are they meant to be instructed? Those who are perfected through devotional service to Bhagavan, or those who are eternally perfect. These are all greatly experienced souls. So, without any cessation, they naturally sport in the nectarian ocean of the nectarian pastimes of the Lord's beauty, of the beauty of the Leela avatars and so on. And then there are some who are sleeping on the bed of sensual happiness. And then there are others who are fainting amidst the waves of the distress of the results of their pious fruitive activities. It is not possible to wake these people up. So, how can the pastimes of Bhagavan be described to them? If through some instruction they can become sadhaka bhaktas, uh, that would be good. So, again, this crest jewel of the Puranas, which is most merciful, again, in order to wake up these souls, indirectly, somehow or other, reattempts. अत्र यथा वह्निना तप्तमङ्गं वह्निनैव उपशाम्यति यथा च भूताविष्टो भूतमन्त्रेणैव प्रबुध्यते तथैव जीवानां मायानिद्रा आवेशः माया कथा एव अपयाति. Just as fire should be fought with fire, and just as a man who has been haunted by a ghost can only be uh, woken up to reality through a mantra that deals with that ghost. Similarly, the obsession, uh, the, the, the jivas being overcome by the sleep of Maya in an obsessive manner, that can be removed only by topics concerning Maya, Yaduktam, as it has been stated in 2.7.53. By hearing a description of Maya uh, properly, with faith, and on a regular basis, then the soul is not overcome by Maya. किंच यद्यपि भागवत कृपालब्ध भगवल्लीलामृत वृष्ट्यैव माया सुख निद्राणोपि कर्म दुःखं मुष्यतोपि जागर्ति स्तिम्यति जीवति नृत्यति आनंदेन माद्यति च तदपि तादृश महत्कृपा यैरेव लभ्यते तैरेव कृतार्थी भूयते न तो सर्वैरेव. And then, even though by a shower of the nectar of the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead obtained by the mercy of the devotees of Bhagavan, one who is sleeping in the happiness of Maya, or one who is fainting with the distress due to pious activities, these two people, wake up. They wake up and then they start living, they dance, they're delighted in happiness. So they do, uh, they they have obtained mercy of such great souls. But we should remember that only they attain success, not everyone. Ataha adhyatma kathaya muhushrutaya labdha samsara titirshāṇām gurupada shrayena prodbhuta yatnānām nikrishta jīvānām api nistaro bhavatu iti. Etadartham eva adhyatmakata paunah punyam. By hearing these topics about spiritual reality repeatedly, when one attains the desire to cross over uh, samsara, or the repetition of birth and rebirth, by taking shelter of the lotus feet of a guru, when one awakens his endeavors, then even inferior jivas also can be liberated. So, with the idea that this happens, these adhyatma, these kind of spiritual philosophical discussions are repeated again and again in Sri Bhagavatam. Bhagavad Bhaktanam Astikhyavatam tu Sarvameva Sri Bhagavatam Amritam Iva Aswadyameva. For devotees of Bhagavan who have um, faith in the Vedic scriptures, for them, everything in Srimad Bhagavatam is relishable. Apicha Shastrasya Asya na kevalam Bhagavantameva adhikritya pravrittihi. Another point to note is in this scripture, it is not simply that uh, the 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 book Sri Bhagavatam does not proceed only regarding Bhagavan. Apitu tan nirvishesha swarupa tat amshabhuto brahma paramatmanorapi. It also discusses his impersonal feature and his plenary portion in the form of Brahman and Paramatma. Yaduktam Shastrarambha, as stated at the beginning of the scripture, Brahmaiti Paramatmiti Bhagavaniti Shabdyate. Iti Brahma Upasakanam Adhyatmadi Katha Abhyasa Upayukta. And for those who are meditating um, for those who are intently meditating on Brahman, the repetition of the discussions regarding Adhyatma are certainly useful. Kimcha Shastrasya Asya Mahimna Brahma Paramatma Upasakanam Api Bhakti Pravarti Tattva. And by the glory of the scripture, even the worshippers of Brahman and Paramatma engage in bhakti. Ataha Phaladashayam Api. So even in consideration of the results, Atmaramasya Munaya Ityade Prayo Bhaktireva Varivarti. So it is bhakti that ultimately shines out mostly because even liberated souls are attracted to Lord Hari, as noted in 1.7.10. Te tat sadhanam, tat phalam cha shuddha bhakta api na katakshaniyam apitu anumodaniyam eva. Therefore, those practices and those results should not be critically overlooked by even Shuddha Bhaktas. Rather, they should be approved. Tasmad, yatha brahmatva paramatmatva matsya kurmadji aneka avataratva dharma jnana balaishwarya rupa guna leela madhurya paripurna Shri Krishna sarvavidha bhaktaireva paricharyate एवमेव ब्रह्म परमात्मा मत्स्य कूर्माद्य अवतार अवतारी तत्तत् सर्वं मूलभूत श्री कृष्ण तदीय गुणलीला माधुर्य ऐश्वर्य तत्प्राप्ति साधन भक्ति प्रेम धर्म ज्ञान योग वैराग्यादि अखिल तत्व प्रदर्शकः ग्रंथः अयमपि तत्स्वरूपभूत इति सर्वं समञ्जसम्. So just as Lord Shri Krishna is served by different types of devotees, and he is perfect in terms of um, being Brahman, Paramatma, Matsya, Kurma, and in the form of various such incarnations, and him being filled with qualities, endowed with qualities such as dharma, righteousness, jnana, philosophical knowledge, bala, strength, aishwarya, opulence, rupa, beauty, guna, auspicious qualities, lila, sweet pastimes, and lila madhurya, uh, lila, pastimes, madhurya, sweetness. So like that, this sacred scripture, which reveals all of the various truths, such as Brahman, Paramatma, Matsya, Kurma, and their various avatars, the source of the incarnations, and the original root cause of all of them, Sri Krishna, his qualities, his pastimes, his sweetness, his glory, the means to achieve them, which is sadhana bhakti, as well as dharma, jnana, yoga, vairagya, and so on. This book is just like him because it is his manifestation. Therefore, all of this is well reconciled. Purushaha prakriti-ikshana-karta andam srishtva yada vinirhritya sarvabhuta atmana sakashat pratakritya vinirhito bhavisthita. So when the Purusha who glances at Prakriti, he creates the Brahmanda and then he separates himself um, and comes out. Tata atmana swasya enam shayana sthanam tasminneva brahmande anvichan. Then he searches out for a place to sleep, lie down within that Brahmanda. Uh, Garbhoda Sangyo Asraksh. What is this? Tapo. What is this? Tapo. Wait. Apo. Correct. He creates the waters known as the Garbhodaka ocean, which is Swayam. He is personally pure. Therefore, the water is also pure. The water is also pure indicates that it is not like the Kshirodaka, the milk ocean and so on. Okay, let's go to this purport. After analysis of the living entities and the Supreme Lord Paramatma, the independent source of all other living beings, Srila Shukadeva Goswami is now presenting the prime necessity for devotion service to the Lord, which is the only occupational business of all living entities. The Supreme Lord Shri Krishna, in all his plenary portions and extensions of plenary portions, are non-different from one another, and thus the supreme independence is in each and every one of them. In order to prove this, Shukadeva Goswami has promised to King Parikshit describes herein the independence of the Purushavatara personality of Godhead, even in the sphere of the material creation. Such activities of the Lord are also transcendental, and therefore they are also Leela, or pastimes of the Absolute Lord. Such pastimes of the Lord are very conducive to the hearers for self-realization in the field of devotion service. Some may argue, why not then relish the transcendental Leela of the Lord as exhibited in the land of Mathura and Vrindavan, which are sweeter than anything in the world? Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur replies that the pastimes of the Lord in Vrindavan are meant to be relished by advanced devotees of the Lord. Neophyte devotees will misunderstand such transcendental activities of the Lord, and therefore the Lord's pastimes in the material sphere related to creation, maintenance, and destruction are verily relishable by the Prakrita Bhaktas or mundane devotees of the Lord. As the yoga system, mainly based on bodily exercises, is meant for the person who is too much attached to the bodily conception of existence. Similarly, the Lord's pastimes related to the creation and destruction of the material world are for those who are too materially attached. For such mundane creatures, the functions of the body and the functions of the cosmic world through physical laws in relationship with the Lord are also therefore included in understanding of the lawmaker, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The scientists explain the material functions by so many technological terms of material law, but such blind scientists forget the lawmaker. The Srimad Bhagavata points out the lawmaker. One should not be amazed by the mechanical arrangement of the complicated engine or dynamo, but one should praise the engineer who creates such a wonderful working machine. That is the difference between the devotee and the non-devotee. Devotees are always full with praising the Lord who directs the physical laws. In the Bhagavad Gita 9.10, the direction of the Lord upon the material nature is described as follows. Mayadhyakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hetunanena kaunteya jagadvipari vartate. The material nature full of physical laws is one of my different energies. Therefore, it is neither independent nor blind. Because I am transcendently all powerful, simply by my glancing over material nature, the physical laws of nature work so wonderfully. The actions and reactions of the physical laws work on that account, and thus the material world is created, maintained, and annihilated again and again. Men with a poor fund of knowledge, however, become astonished by studying the physical laws, both within the creation, within the construction of the individual body, and within the cosmic manifestation. And foolishly, they the existence of God, taking it for granted that the physical laws are independent without any metaphysical control. The Bhagavad Gita 9.11 replies to this foolishness in the following words: Avajananti mam mudha manushim tanumashritam param bhavam ajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. The foolish men mudhas do not know the personality of Godhead in his eternal form of bliss and knowledge. The foolish man thinks of the transcendental body of the Lord as something like his own, and therefore he cannot think of the unlimited controlling power of the Lord, who is not visible in the acting of the physical laws. The Lord is, however, visible to the naked eyes of people in general when he descends by his own personal potency. Lord Krishna incarnated himself as he is and played very wonderful parts as the Lord himself. And the Bhagavad Gita concerns such wonderful actions and knowledge. Yet foolish men will not accept Lord Krishna as the Supreme Lord. Generally, they consider the infinitesimal and infinite features of the Lord because they themselves are unable to become either the infinitesimal or the infinite. But one should know that the infinite and infinitesimal sizes of the Lord are not his highest glories. The most wonderful manifestation of the Lord's power is exhibited when the infinite Lord becomes visible to our eyes as one of us. Yet his activities are different from those of the finite beings. Lifting a mountain at the age of 7 years and marrying 16,000 wives in the prime of his youth are some of the examples of his infinite energy, but the mudhas, after seeing them or hearing about them, decry them as legendary mythology and take the Lord as one of them. They cannot understand that the Lord Sri Krishna, although in the form of a human being by his own potency, is still the Supreme Lord with full potency as a Supreme Controller. When, however, the mudhas give submissive oral reception to the messages of the Lord in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita or the Srimad Bhagavatam, transmitted through the channel of disciplic succession, such mudhas also become devotees of the Lord by the grace of his pure devotees. And for this reason only, in both the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, the pastimes of the Lord in the material world are delineated for the benefit of those men with a poor fund of knowledge. 11. तास्ववात्सीत् स्वसृष्टासु सहस्रं परिवत्सरान् तेन नारायणो नाम यदापः पुरुषोद्भवः. That supreme person is not impersonal. Therefore, he is distinctively a Nara or person. Therefore, the transcendental water created from the supreme Nara is known as Nara. And because he lies down on that water, he is known as Narayana, the shelter of Nara. So this is an etymological explanation of the name Narayana, because he is the one who resides in the water. And there is a famous statement, Apo Nara iti prokta, Apo vai narasuna ayanam tasyatah purvam, tena Narayana smritaha. These waters are referred to as Nara. And these waters themselves have come out of Nara, the Supreme Lord. It's called Nara. And the water that has come out of him is referred to as Nara. And the shelter of that Nara is, shelter means Ayana. Narayana is remembered as Narayana. तदेवं ब्रह्मांडं कर्तुम् आरभ्यापि शयनलीलार्थं कंचित् कालं स्थगितचेष्टा आसीत् इत्याह. So even though he had begun to create the Brahmanda, initially he engaged in the pastime of lying down for some time without doing anything. That is noted in the current verse. 12. Dravyam karma cha kalascha स्वभावो जीव एव च यद अनुग्रहतः santi न santi यद उपेक्षया. One should definitely know that all material ingredients, activities, time, and modes, and the living entities who are meant to enjoy them all exist by his mercy only. And as soon as he does not care for them, everything becomes non existent. Yes, that's a question here.
Prabhu, I have two questions. First is when while describing the 10th verse, in the comment, while reading the commentary, you mentioned that how these sleeping souls will be awakened to reality. They are sleeping in Maya, and then you read that only when they hear about Maya will they be awakened. So this was not clear to me that how by hearing which kind of Maya they will hear that they will get awakened.
When they hear about Yoga Maya and Mahamaya, both types of Maya, but those who are conditioned souls, they should primarily hear about the effect of Mahamaya as presented in Srimad Bhagavatam. In other words, we have to hear about Mahamaya as described by the Supreme Lord in Srimad Bhagavatam, as presented in Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam itself is the Lord's own communication to the conditioned souls. So when they hear about Mahamaya from Srimad Bhagavatam, then they will become capable of getting out of the effect of Mahamaya. That is the point.
Okay. So this Mahamaya and Srimad Bhagavatam means these creational pastimes.
There are all Maya does all kinds of things. So his creation, maintenance, destruction, all of these.
Okay.
Okay. Tasya prabhavamaha. The potency of that Supreme Lord is now spelled out in the current verse, text 12. Dravyam refers to physical elements, the ingredients. Karmadini nimittani. Karma, kala, swabhava. These are all nimitta karana. These are all the efficient causes. The jiva is the experiencer. Yasya anugrahat santi. By whose mercy they exist means by whose mercy they become capable of doing what they are supposed to do. Tadasya sarvam tad vyarthamevasi. At that time, when the Supreme Lord was lying on the water, before actually creating any of the details of material existence, everything existed, but they were just uselessly there. That is pointed out in the current verse. You have another question?
Yes, sir. It is a follow-up of that question. Then usually we avoid this these creation and other topics because they said like for new boys they may feel little bored or they may not relish. So if this is the case that we have to hear about Mahamaya from Bhagavatam, then how to adjust these two, that how to present to this topic to the new audience, or is it recommended to do it later stage?
As far as I know, for the base system and all that, it's already worked out what should be taught to them. Already, so I don't understand why we invent the wheel. Somebody went through all, the portions. What should be taught first? What should be taught next?
In that it comes little later, not right at the beginning.
Yeah, everything works out.
Okay,
Bhagavad
and
Gita, Krishna hardly talks about his personal pastimes, his Yogamaya pastimes.
So in 8th verse where this Adhyatmik, Adi Bhautik and Adi Devik were mentioned, so Adi Yatmik is the controlled, the controller is termed as Adi Devik, and Adi Bhautik was mentioned that what is seen on the eyeball is Adi Bhautik, material body is Adi Bhautik, person. So this was not, this I am unable to understand.
Gross body. The gross body is the adhibautic person.
But
That's all.
but it's not like separate person.
No, but when we are in tamoguna, we consider the gross body to be the person. So the Vedas, they start by reflecting our thought processes and then gradually they drag us up. So the person who is perceived by a tamasic person is nothing but the gross body, which is sustained by food and drink. So it starts with that.
Okay, bro.
Okay. Tasya samashti virat antaryaminah prabhavamaha. Now the potency of the super soul of the collective universal form is described. Dravyam upadanam prithviyadikam. Dravya refers to the ingredients such as earth, which means this refers to the physical elements, the gross elements. Karma adini mittan. Karma and so on refer to the efficient causes. Jivaha, Hiranyagarbhaha, Mokta. And the Jiva here refers to Hiranyagarbha, the experiencer, Brahma. Yasya anugrahad yadanvayat. Nahi paramatmana vina jivaha deho va tishtet. Swakarya kshamo va bhavet. It is by his mercy. In other words, it is by his entrance into any of these that, or when he is accompanying them, supporting them, entering into them, only then any of these begin to function. Without Paramatma, the jiva cannot function, the body cannot function. Um, None of the activities that you intend to do, you're able to do. The living entities are the enjoyers of the material ingredients, time, modes, etc., because they want to lord it over the material nature. The Lord is the supreme enjoyer, and the living entities are meant to assist the Lord in his enjoyment and thus participate in the transcendental enjoyment of everyone. The enjoyer and the enjoyed both participate in enjoyment, but deluded by the illusory energy. The living entities want to become the enjoyer like the Lord, although they are not meant for such enjoyment. The jivas, the living entities, are mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita as the Lord's superior nature or Paraprakriti. And so also it is mentioned in the Vishnu Purana. Therefore, the living entities are never the Purushas or the factual enjoyers. As such, the spirit of enjoyment by the living entity in the material world is false. It means it is based on a misconception. In the spiritual world, the living entities are pure in nature and therefore they are associates in the enjoyment of the Supreme Lord. In the material world, the spirit of enjoyment of the living entities by dint of their own actions, karma, gradually fades by the laws of nature. And thus the illusory energy dictates in the ears of the conditioned souls that they should become one with the Lord. This is the last snare of the illusory energy. When the last illusion is also cleared off by the mercy of the Lord, the living entity becomes reinstated in his original position and thus becomes actually liberated. For this attainment of liberation from the material clutches, the Lord creates the material world, maintains it for some time, 1000 years of his measurement, as stated in the previous words, and then again annihilates it by his will. The living entities are therefore completely dependent on the mercy of the Lord, and all their so called enjoyments by scientific improvement are crushed into dust when the Lord desires. 13. Eko nanatvamanvichan yogatalpar samuttitah वीर्यम हिरण्मयम देवो Maya Vyasrajatridha. The Lord, while lying on his bed of mystic slumber, generated the seminal symbol, golden in hue, through his external energy, out of his desire to manifest varieties of living entities from himself alone. अत्र महासमष्टि व्यष्टि जीवानां त्रयाणां तदुपाधीनां च सृष्टिप्रक्रियाम् अभेदप्रायतया विवरितुम् aha. Now this is a combined description of the process of creation of the individual jivas, the collective jivas in one universe, and all the jivas in all of material existence together, along with their respective material designations. So initially, all the jivas had his swamshas, his primary portions, as well as the jivas, all of them had been merged into him. Therefore, he is described as alone. He was alone. Sampratito, but right now, Tatat Swamshan Avir Bhavya. Then he wanted to reveal all of his different plenary portions. And in that way, he wanted to create a variety. So then he stood from his place of Yoga Nidra. So then he divided himself, and then he first of all created the seed for the Brahmandas and so on. Samashti Viradeva Kathamabhu. How was the collective universal form? Iti Akankshayam. Anticipating this, he speaks the current verse. Ekah pralaye swamshan jivan atmani vilapya ekatvena sitaha anu anantaram srishtikale nanatvam icchan taneva jivan atmanas sakashad vibhaktan kurvan. He separated the jivas from himself. Yoga eva talpam shayya tasmaditi mahapralaye ratristhaniye shayitva srishtikale pratarutthitas san devah Divyan Purusha. It's not Divyan Purusha. Divyan. Divyan. So he had lied down on that Yoga Nidra at a time that can be compared to night. And then at a time that can be compared to early morning, he wanted to engage in the activity of creation with a sportive spirit. Maya, Swashaktya. And he used Maya, which is a reference to his own potency. Mahatattvadini Karanani Srishtva. Then he created the original material causes, Mahatattva and so on. Taihi Karyabhutam Viryam Hiranmayam Kanakavarnam Prakashabahulam Brahmandam Savaranam Asrijatiti Maha Samashti Srishti. Then he created this golden, he let out that which is referred to as his semen in the form of the golden, brilliant Brahmanda, along with its coverings. Now, this is actually a reference to Mahasamashti Srishti, the creation in total. Tatascha teshamev mahatattvadinam kinchit amshair bhagavad shaktyeva parasparamelitei samashti virat. Panchashat koti yojana parimita anda kataha madhyagata srishto. And then the elements they combine together, and then they form this 50 crore yojana brahmanda ball. Tadeva Adi Purushas, Tadeva and Kataham Pravishya. And then he enters into that Brahmanda, that original person. Tadartham Swasrishta Jalayana Apurya. Then he fills half of it with water that he creates. Tatrastam Samashti Virajam Swajatara Madhya Gatam Kritva. And then he takes the collective universal form that was in his womb. Sasarvarshani Tasmin Garbhodeva Sushwapa. Then he lies, then he goes to sleep in Garbhodaka ocean for 1,000 years. Tadante, Yogatalpa, Samutita. Then he wakes up and he divides his golden potency for this, which is actually the collective universal form. into 3. Why into 3? Created in 3 features. You see this? Tridha, in 3 features. Tridhaiva kim? What is this 3? Tatraha, adhidaivam ityadi. This is this adhidaiva, adhyatma, adhibhuta in that way. Esha eva samashtis. Tasya nabhidvarat. What is this? Karmalana. Something is wrong here. Wait. It's all here. Kamala. Not karma. It's kamala. What is this? Karma. Kamala nalatmaka bhavishyati. So then it is this collective universal form that will become the stem of the lotus from his navel. Sayeva punas chaturdasha lokatmaka viraja samgya sthulo bhavi. And it is going to become the gross set of 14 words known as the Viraja. Sukshmastu Hiranyagarbha Samashti Jiva. And the subtle form of it is like Hiranyagarbha, which refers to all the jivas together. Vairaja eva visargadhyartham chaturmukha bhavi. And the product of this universal form will be the four-headed Brahma for the sake of engaging in secondary creation and so on. Iti Brahmanas Traividyam. So in that way, Brahma has 3 different forms. Atha Prakrita Manasa Ramaha. Now we come back to our topic. In the Bhagavad Gita 9.7 to 8, the creation and annihilation of the material world are stated as follows. Sarvabhutani kaunteya prakritim yanti mami kham kalpakshaye punastani kalpado visrajamyaham prakritim swam avashtabhya visrajami punah punah bhutagramamyam kritsnam vasham prakritir vashat. At the end of each millennium, the creative forces, namely the material nature and the living entities who struggle in the material nature, all merge together into the transcendental body of the Lord. And again, when the Lord decides to manifest them, all of them are again displayed by the Lord. Therefore, the material nature is working under the control of the Lord. All manifestations under the agency of material nature and under the control of the Lord are thus repeatedly created and annihilated by the will of the Lord. Therefore, before the creation or manifestation of the material cosmic world, the Lord exists as total energy, Mahasamashti. Thus, desiring himself to be diffused to many, he expands himself further into the multi-total energy, Samashti. From the multi-total energy, he further expands himself into individuals in 3 dimensions, namely Adhyatmik, Adhidaivik, and Adhibhautik, as explained before, Vyashti. Vyashti means individual, Samashti means collective, and Mahasamashti means the super collective. As such, the whole creation and the creative energies are non-different and different simultaneously. Because everything is an emanation from him, the Mahavishnu or Mahasamashti. Nothing of the cosmic energies is different from him. But all such expanded energies have specific functions and display as designed by the Lord. And therefore, they are simultaneously different from the Lord. The living entities are also similar energy, marginal potency of the Lord, and thus they are simultaneously one with and different from him. At the stage of non-manifestation, the living energies remain potent in the Lord. And when they are let loose in the cosmic manifestation, they're exhibited differently in terms of different desires under the modes of nature. Such differential manifestations of the living energies are conditional states of the living entities. The liberated living entities, however, in the Sanatana eternal manifestation are unconditionally surrendered souls. And therefore, they are not subject to the conditions of creation and annihilation. So this creation takes place by the glance of the Lord from his bedstead of mystic slumber. Thus all the universes and the Lord of the universe, Brahma, are again and again manifested and annihilated. 14. Adhidaivam athadhyatmam adhibhutam iti prabhu athaikam paurusham viryam trithabhi vyatatatchrunu. Just hear from me how the potency of his lordship divides one into 3 called the controlling living entity, controlling entities, the controlled entities, and the material bodies in the manner mentioned above. See, the material bodies, the gross bodies, why are they brought into discussion? Because that is exactly the field of control by the demigods. The demigods are able to control these gross bodies, different aspects of the gross bodies. There's a whole system. Taseva prapancha atithyadena. So this is an elaboration of what was merely indicated in the previous verse. Wait. Quick check. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that this is another type of threefold division. 15. Antasharira akashat purushasya vichesh ojasaho balam jagye tatah prano mahanasu. From the sky, situated within the transcendental body of the manifesting Mahavishnu. Okay, I think I got it. This must be the collective adhidaiva, collective, it must be the collective adhyatma, collective adhidaiva, collective adhibhuta. From the sky situated within the transcendental body of the manifesting Mahavishnu, sensory energy, mental force, and bodily strength are all generated, as well as the sum total of the fountainhead of the total living force. Antasharire akashaha. Tasmat kriyashaktiya tatra vividham cheshtamanasya satah oja. Indriya shakti, saho manashakti, balam deha shakti. Tatah shaktyatmakat sukshmad rupa prana sutrakhya. Mahan mukhya asuhu prana sarvesham. This is already included in the translation. तत्र धातुं विवरितं प्रथमं प्राणं विवृणोति. In order to detail this threefold Adhyatma Adhidaiva Adhibhuta, he elaborates on, first of all, the prana that came out of him. Antasharire tasyaiva garbhibhutasya mahasamashti rupasya purushasya abhyantare ya akasha. This is talking about that that Purusha who had become the Mahasamashti Purusha. That means he is the cause of all the universes. From him, Akasha came out, from which Prana came out, which means it became very clearly manifested. And then one by one, other things came out. Prana is also known as Sutra. 16. Anupranantiyam prana, pranantam sarvajantushu, apanantam apanantim naradevam ivanuga. As the followers of a king follow their lord, similarly, when the total energy is in motion, all other living entities move, and then when the total energy stops endeavoring, all other living entities stop sensual activities. This is the description of, this is the glory of that prana. Prana Vishtigata Vayavaha. And these different, this prana individualized becomes separated into various vayus. Mukhya prana shakti eva, vyashta prana shakti riti eva atra vivakshitam. And the potency of these individual living forces is like the potency of Mukhya Prana. the chief prana. Jivana Vyanjakattvena Mahatvam Darshayati. All of this discussion of the greatness of prana is to point out that life is manifested because of this prana. Prana is discussed here. The individual living entities are completely dependent on the total energy of the Supreme Purusha. No one has independent existence, just as no electric lamp has independent effulgence. Each and every electrical instrument depends fully on the total powerhouse. The total powerhouse depends on the reservoir of water for generating electricity. Water depends on the clouds depend on the sun depends on creation, and the creation depends on the movement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of all causes. 17. प्राणेनाक्षिपताक्षुदृढ अंतरा जायते विभो pipasato jakshatascha prang mukham nirabhidyata. The living force, being agitated by the Virat Purusha, generated hunger and thirst, and when he desired to drink and eat, the mouth opened. Prabhu, where is the word? Iti. We have Vibhoho, but it looks like Sridhar Swami reads it as Prabhoho. The meaning is the same, of the Lord. Iti Virat Jiva Abhedena Upasanartham Uktam. Here, the non-difference of the jivas and this Virat is for the sake of meditation. Desiring to eat, desiring to drink. Pipasato yakshatascha iti anena supta tattad vasana matram uchyate. This refers to the dormant propensity to drink and eat. Yadeva swabhava rupam sat tattat karyam sampadayati. So it is his original nature that comes out. And this is only an indication. This refers to the functioning of all the senses. Mukham iti vyashti mukham eva. Tan mukhatvena udishyate. So here, the mouth open refers to the collective mouth. That's samudaya karanam atra rupatva tanmukhasya. So this is the cause for the mouths of all the creatures. Ekatvam atra samoha apekshaya. Eka upalakshatvena vageya. So here, everything is written in singular number. The mouth open, one mouth open. So it can be taken to stand for all the mouths, or else this can be taken as a single instance based on which we understand all the other instances. Tatra samashto parameshwaratva aropaha. So here, the jivas are being collectively referred to, but the Supreme Lord is superimposed on it for the sake of meditation. The process by which all living beings in the womb of the mother develop their sense organs and sense perceptions appears to follow the same principles in the case of the Virat Purusha, the sum total of all living entities. Therefore, the supreme cause of all generation is not impersonal or without desire. The desires for all kinds of sense perception and sense organs exist in the Supreme, and thus they take place in the individual persons. This desire is the nature of the Supreme Living Being, the Absolute Truth. Because he has the sum total of all mouths, the individual living entities have mouths. Similarly, with all other senses and sense organs. Here, the mouth is a symbolic representation of all sense organs, for the same principles apply to the others also. मुखतस्तालु निर्भिन्नम जिह्वा तत्रोपजायते ततो नाना रसोजज्ञे जिह्वया योधिगम्यते. From the mouth, the palate became manifested, and thereupon the tongue was also generated. After this, all the different tastes came into existence so that the tongue can relish them, so that the tongue can experience them. Adhigamyate literally means experience. Talu adhishtanam. So the palate is the uh, location for this experience of taste. Jihva indriyam. Tongue is the sense. Nana rasaha vishayaha. The various tastes are the sense objects. Varunasya devata gyatavya. And Varuna is the presiding deity for the tongue. All of this should be understood. Evam sarvatra adhishtanam indriyam devata vishaya iti etat chatushtayam anuktam api uhyam. So in that way, for all of the senses, there is the location, there is the sense organ, there is the presiding deity, and there is the sense object. These four, even though they are not stated here explicitly in the text, should be inferred. Tridhatvam vibhrunvam tad upalakshya chaturdhatvam api darshayati. So while explaining the three features meaning Adhyatmadi, Bhuta, Adi, Daiva, he explains it in terms of four features, as Sridhar Swami explained. Tato nanaraso jagye iti tu samashtireva dharmaha. So this is, we should remember that this is referring to a collective description. Tato adhisthana vishayavadhibhutam, vishayav adhibhutam. Vishayav adhibhutam. Indriyam devata devam iti sarvatra chaturvidhyepi trividhyameva drashtavyam. Now here the location and the sense organ, they come within the adhibhuta category. The sense organ comes under adhyatma category, and the devata comes under the adhideva category. So the four-fold classification should be understood to also fit into the threefold classification. This gradual process of evolution suggests the explanation of the controlling deities Adhideva, in this case Varuna. The mouth becomes the resting place for the tongue, which tastes all the different relishable juices of which the controlling deity is Varuna. This suggests therefore that Varuna was also generated along with the development of the tongue. The tongue and the palate being instrumental are Adhibhutam, or forms of matter, but the functioning deity, who is a living entity, is Adhideva, whereas the person undergoing the function is Adhyatma. Thus, the three categories are also explained as to their birth after the opening of the mouth of the Virat Purusha. The four principles mentioned in this verse serve to explain the three main principles, namely the Adhyatma, Adhideva, and the Adhibhutam, as explained before. One verse we will take up, 19. Vivakshyor mukhato bhumno vakhnirvag vyakritam tayo jale chaitasya suchiram nirodhas samajayata. When the Supreme desired to speak, speeches were vibrated from the mouth. Then the controlling deity fire was generated from the mouth. But when the Supreme was lying in the water, all these functions remained suspended. The peculiarity of the gradual development of the different senses is simultaneously supported by their controlling deities. It is to be understood, therefore, that the activities of the sense organs are controlled by the will of the Supreme. The senses are, so to speak, offering a license for the conditioned souls who are to use them properly under the control of the controlling deity deputed by the Supreme Lord. One who violates such controlling regulations has to be punished by degradation to a lower status of life. Consider, for example, the tongue and its controlling deity, Varuna. The tongue is meant for eating, and men, animals, and birds each have their different tastes because of different licenses. The taste of human beings and that of the swine are not on the same level. The controlling deity, however, awards or certifies a particular type of body when the particular living entity develops a taste in terms of different modes of nature. If the human being develops taste without discrimination, as does the swine, then the controlling deity is certainly certified for the next term to award him the body of a swine. The swine accepts, swine means a pig. The swine accepts any kind of foodstuff, including stools, and a human being who has developed such indiscriminate taste must be prepared for a degraded life in the next life. Such a life is also God's grace because a conditioned soul desired a body like that for perfectly tasting a particular type of foodstuff. If a man gets the body of a swine, it must be considered the grace of the Lord because the Lord awards the facility. After death, the next body is offered by the by superior control, not blindly. A human being, therefore, must be on his guard as to what sort of body he is going to have in the next life. An irresponsible life of indiscrimination is risky, and that is the declaration of all the scriptures. Okay, I'll stop with that. I'll just note that uh, I have to start with text. I'll start with text 20.10. 20 to 30. Okay. So start with that. Vancha kalpatarubhyasya kripasinubhyasya. Patityanam pavanebhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha.